Welcome to this course on how to plant a vegetable garden. Planting is an important step to growing vegetables and increases the likelihood of a successful garden. This course is meant to give you the tools to plan a productive vegetable garden and set you on the path towards an abundant harvest. By engaging in this presentation, you will be able to identify your gardening goals, choose a garden site with the best sun exposure and accessibility, recognize soil components, choose plants based on garden site and food preferences, use last frost dates to determine when to plant, and practice using a gardening notebook. Let's begin by discussing the benefits of home gardening and the commitment and expectations that go along with it. So why have a home garden? By having a home garden, you can increase fruit and vegetable intake for improved nutrition. And with some upfront investments into your garden, you can grow vegetables cheaper than buying them at the store. Gardening reduces stress and provides outdoor exercise. Home gardening helps us have a connection with the food that we eat. To see your garden through to its harvest, you'll need to commit time and energy throughout the entire process of planting, planting, maintaining, and harvesting. You'll need to go out to your garden often to weed, water, harvest, and check out any issues like pests and diseases. It's estimated that to tend to a 100 square foot garden, you need 40 minutes a week for planting and cultivation and 30 minutes for watering per week. A beginner garden will be much smaller and would roughly translate to about 12 to 25 minutes a week. Although this might not sound like that much, it's important that you commit to working in your garden and don't skip watering and weeding. This task is much easier if done as a family or shared with some friends who can all benefit from the vegetables. You'll want to think about what times of the day you have available and who will be participating as you plan your garden. The number one rule for a first-time gardener is to start small. Gardening is a lifelong process. It takes a lot of practice and unfortunately failure to be able to grow a large, diverse garden that will provide for your household. By starting small, you'll set yourself up for success. You can commit your time to a few vegetables and add new plants each season. Don't give up just because some of your plants did poorly. Try it again in a new location, try different plants and new methods. Throughout this course, I'll be giving you activities that will get you started on the planning process and get you excited about growing vegetables. This first activity is to start a gardening notebook. A gardening notebook is a great way to plan, organize, and record everything you do in your garden. To get started, write down some times throughout the week that you can commit to gardening activities and who might be able to help. Let's get into the details of choosing a space for your garden. In this section, we'll talk about sun, soil, and garden types. The location of your garden is one of the key ingredients to a successful garden. Sun exposure for a plant is usually described in three categories: full sun or part shade, and shade. Most vegetables need full sun, which is 6 to 10 hours of direct sunlight. The amount of direct sunlight your yard gets depends on the direction it faces and the objects in it that create shadows. Trees, houses, and buildings will block direct sunlight in your yard. If your yard gets very little direct sunlight due to shadows cast by trees and other houses around you, think about planting in pots on your deck or porch or finding a community garden plot. If it isn't obvious how much direct sunlight the areas around your house get, create a sun map. You can do this by observing where the sun is hitting in your yard throughout the day. Start early around 7 or 8 and check each location every hour. Although you'll most likely be thinking about starting a garden in the spring, it's best to do this throughout the year, in early spring, early summer, late summer, and fall. Early spring sun exposure might be great, but as the season progresses, the trees start to leaf out and block the sun. A full sun area might become part shade. Here is an example of a sun map I did in my yard this spring. I started at 9:30 in the morning, which is in the upper left corner, and took a picture roughly every hour. You can see at 9:30 the trees are blocking the sun, but by 12 the area is now mostly sunny. By 1 p.m. the entire space has full sun. By 2:30 it begins to fade away, and by 4 it's back to shade. At 5:30, it gets a little more light. Now this is not perfect, but between 12 and 2:30 there is sun. Even if the sun started at 12 and went to 4, there is still only 4 hours of sun. This would not be the best location for a garden. The next activity for your garden notebook in the planning process is to assess the sun exposure of your yard, deck, porch, or wherever you think you might want to plant a garden. It may be easy to pinpoint some areas that get a lot of sun, but to get a better idea of how many hours of sun those areas get, take pictures of each area each hour and compare them, and then add up the amount of full sun hours. To do this without a camera, you can make a chart like this one in your notebook. Select a few areas of your yard and give them a nickname. Check the site each hour and put an X in the box at that hour if it is receiving full sun. At the end of the day, count up how many hours each area had sun. Your soil is just as important as the amount of sun your garden gets. The quality of your soil greatly impacts how well your garden will do. There's a lot more to soil than meets the eye. Soil is a mixture of mineral particles, organic matter, and living organisms. The right combination promotes healthy plants. For plants to grow, they need soil that has enough pore space for water, nutrients, and oxygen to flow, and the right composition to anchor plants to the ground. The mineral particles in soil are sand and clay. When your soil has a lot of sand compared to other components of soil, plants have a hard time anchoring because there's nothing holding the particles together. The pore spaces are also so large that water drains too quickly. If your soil is made up of mostly clay, it is very compacted and sticky, creating smaller pores. These small spaces prevent water from draining. Loam is a nice mixture of minerals and organic matter, creating a fluffy soil that drains well and has a composition that plants can hold on to. The organic matter component of soil releases nutrients into the soil and sustains living organisms. It is the glue that sandy soil needs to hold plants in place. In clay soil, it adds pore space, creating better drainage. To improve your soil, add organic matter. This can be in the form of compost, straw, grass clippings, chopped up leaves, or organic mulch. Now that you've found the sunniest spot in your yard, dig up the soil in that area and squeeze it in your hands. Is it hard and sticky, grainy and sandy, wet or dry? Determine where on the spectrum of sand, loam, or clay your soil is. To learn more about your soil, you can buy a home soil test from Michigan State University Extension. It can be ordered online and sent directly to you. You'll collect your sample and send it back. Once it is tested, you'll receive details about your soil, including soil texture, pH, nutrient levels, organic matter percentage, and personalized recommendations for fertilizer and amendments. Soil testing is the best way to ensure your soil can support the vegetables you want to grow, so don't guess, soil test. The MSU Extension Soil Test can also test your soil for heavy metals and toxins. Lead is a concern in urban areas where land uses have contaminated the soil. Low levels of lead can be found naturally in your soil, but if lead is detected above 300 parts per million, it is considered unsafe, and you should use raised beds or containers for gardening. More information can be found at the Michigan State University Extension website listed. Lastly, when choosing a garden site, make sure you locate it close to a watering source. You want to set yourself up for success. If watering your garden is difficult and time-consuming because you have to haul water out to it, you're more likely to skip watering and your plants will suffer. Locate your garden to make it easy to maintain. Now that you've found your site, let's discuss the types of garden beds that can be used: in-ground, raised beds, and containers. An in-ground bed is your traditional garden. It is the best option if you have a large sunny space and decently healthy soil. The benefits of an in-ground bed are that it is less work and money to get started. Some disadvantages are that they have more weeds and that you have to make do with the soil you already have by adding amendments when necessary. To start an in-ground bed, you'll need to remove the vegetation that is there to expose the soil. There are many ways you can do this. You can dig up the sod and weeds, or you can smother them with a large tarp or sheet of plastic. To do it this way, you'll spread the tarp over and anchor it down with some bricks or rocks. After a few days, the grass will be dead and you can remove it. Once the vegetation is removed, add 2 inches of compost or garden soil on top. Another type of bed is a raised bed. It is a great option if you have poor soil or have any difficulty bending over or kneeling onto the ground. The pros of a raised bed are less weeds and less soil amendments, but the cons are that they take much more preparation to start and cost more due to the building materials and the soil that needs to be added. To prepare your soil in a raised bed, you'll need to purchase a garden soil in bags from a garden center or a topsoil compost mixture that can be purchased by the yard from a landscaping store. Make sure to build your beds 8 to 12 inches high. A container garden is best for small spaces or shady yards. Pros of containers are that they can be placed on your deck or porch for easy access and watering. You can move pots around to optimize sun, and you have control over the soil. The cons are the cost of containers and potting soil, the limited types of vegetables that can be grown in containers, and the increased amount of watering due to the very well draining potting soil. Make sure to choose containers that have draining holes in the bottom. Almost anything can be used as a container for gardening, including 5-gallon buckets or tin coffee containers. So get creative. It is best to use potting soil for containers. Vegetables being grown in a container need very well draining soil. And also, by digging up soil from your yard, you may bring pests and diseases that can ruin your plants. For successful containers, choose a light potting mix that has fertilizer built into it. And make sure to choose plants that can do well in containers, such as bush varieties. Remember, the number one rule for a new gardener is to start small. If starting an in-ground or raised bed, make sure it is no wider than 4 feet. You'll need to be able to reach in or walk through to tend and harvest your vegetables. A 4x4 or a 4x8 plot is a great size to start with. For this next activity, think about your proposed garden site and the pros and cons of each type of garden bed, and decide if you would like to try in-ground, raised beds, containers, or a combination. Now that you have your garden site and bed type, let's discuss choosing vegetables. Start thinking about what types of food you'll enjoy eating. Are there some vegetables that taste better fresh? Is there something that you love to eat but it's hard to find at the grocery store? Or what about prices? Is there something that's worth growing yourself? Will your family eat these vegetables, or will it just be you? It's important to choose foods that you are excited about and that won't go to waste on the vine or your counter. Vegetables can be separated into 2 types of plants, warm and cool season. Cool season plants can tolerate cooler temperatures and some frost, and can therefore be planted early in the season. Warm season vegetables need warmer soil temperatures and can be damaged by frost. Cool season vegetables can be characterized as root vegetables and leafy greens, while warm season vegetables have flowers that turn to larger fruits, like tomatoes and peppers. Cool season vegetables still need full sun, but also won't tolerate long hours of late summer heat. Cool season vegetables can be replanted in the late summer for a fall harvest once the evenings start cooling off. Some examples of cool season vegetables are lettuce, spinach, kale, Swiss chard, cabbage, carrots, garlic, beets, broccoli, and cauliflower. Some examples of warm season vegetables are tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, zucchini, winter squash, watermelon, and eggplant. Some vegetables are easier to grow than others, so as a beginner, start with easier, low-maintenance plants, such as tomatoes, zucchini, peppers, cabbage, bush beans, lettuce, beets, carrots, chard, and radishes. Here is a guide from Michigan State University Extension that suggests which plants are best for your gardening level. For example, on the very left, as a beginner container gardener, try leaf lettuce and onions as your cool season vegetables, and summer squash, tomatoes, and a bush variety of cucumbers. As you progress in your gardening experience, you can start adding some more difficult plants. You might be wondering how much to plant to be able to eat from your garden regularly and to have enough for you and your family. There are many resources out there that have estimated how many plants or feet of row space you'll need to eat each vegetable fresh and stored for a season. The chart to the right is from Texas A&M Extension that shows how many plants or feet of row space per person in your family. These are just estimates, and sources may vary based on how they measured. If you and your family love eating fresh tomatoes, you might choose to grow 6 to 9 tomato plants to always have enough tomatoes for everyone. But remember, as a beginner, you don't want to get in over your head, so use these resources as a guide as you begin your garden. Again, less is more, so start small. Choose 3 to 5 plants to start with, and add more plants each season using what you learned from last season. Make sure to manage your expectations. Another thing to think about when choosing vegetables is their storage potential. Some vegetables do well in the freezer, while others lose a lot of their flavor and texture. Some veggies need to be canned and preserved, and others can be left in a cool, dark room for months. Freezing can often change the flavor and texture of a vegetable, but can be used for a specific cooking method or recipe. It is best to blanch vegetables before freezing, but some vegetables like spinach and kale do not need to be blanched before freezing and can be used in soups, pastas, or smoothies. For more information on how to use, store, and preserve fresh vegetables, go to the MSU Extension Michigan Fresh website. Now that you have an idea of what to plant, we'll move on to how to plant. You can start vegetables by seeds or transplants. Seeds can be started indoors and then transplanted outdoors, or they can be planted directly into your garden. Transplants can be purchased at a garden center as already established plants. The advantages of seeds include the option to start indoors, and they are much cheaper compared to transplants. Another benefit is that they have access to a wider variety of vegetables. Transplants have many advantages like an earlier harvest, more reliability, greater protection from plants, and easier weed management. But transplants are more expensive than seeds and have less variety. Seeds can be a rewarding way to grow vegetables and much more economical. To be successful with seeds, you'll need to understand the seed packet lingo. Sowing, spacing, thinning are common words used on a seed packet. Sowing is the process of planting the seed in the soil. Spacing is the amount of space between seeds in a row and spacing between rows. Thinning means that once the seeds have sprouted, they're true leaves, you remove the weak seedlings to reduce overcrowding. You'll also see days to germination or harvest. Days to germination is how many days until you'll see a sprout come up, while days to harvest is how long until you'll have vegetables ready. Seed packets will vary based on what information they provide, but knowing these few words will be helpful regardless. When buying transplants, you want to make sure you're buying a healthy plant. So make sure it is sturdy and without flowers. Check for signs of disease or pest, such as yellow drooping leaves. And make sure the plant is not root bound. For this activity, spend some time with your family deciding on vegetables you want to eat and grow. Choose 2 to 5 vegetables and decide if you want to try seeds or transplants or both. The last step in the planning process is when to grow your vegetables. The main guideline is the last frost date. The last frost date refers to an estimated date in your area of the state that is most likely the last day a frost will occur. In Michigan, this is usually in May or June. Memorial Weekend is often a safe bet for doing your planting without a fear of frost. A full chart is available through MSU Extension. Each year is different, and the last frost date is only an estimate. It is important to pay close attention to the daily high and low temperatures, and wait until the low temperature is consistently above 32 degrees before planting any warm weather vegetables. Cool weather vegetables can be planted when the soil is able to be worked and is no longer frozen. This can be as early as March. If an unexpected frost is in the forecast after you've planted your vegetables, you can cover the plants with plastic, tarp, or even sheets and blankets. For this activity, use your garden notebook to track the weather and record possible planting dates in relation to the last frost date. Once you plant your seeds or transplants, note the date they were planted and where you planted them. Mark them with plant labels. Growing vegetables can be a fun and rewarding experience. It takes a lot of trial and error to get things right, so do not be discouraged if your plants fail. Make notes throughout the season and try a new approach or location next year.